Hello and welcome to our webcast for November 10, 2017. My name is Christian Debré and this is Amy Asbrook, the director of Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet.
Hello.
Also joining us is Taylor Hyatt, our policy analysis and outreach coordinator. Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet is a non-religious organization by and for people with disabilities and our allies. Our goal is to inform, unify, and give voice to the disability rights opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and other ending of life practices that discriminates against people with disabilities. Today's topics, we have two topics like we do for many times. Review of Canada disability rights legislation in Manitoba. Quebec's commission, this is the second one, Quebec's commission on end-of-life care issue is second annual report. It's second annual report. So Amy will talk about it with us.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, review of Canadian disability rights legislation, Manitoba. This week, we are continuing our review of Canadian accessibility legislation looking at Manitoba. For Manitobans Act, sometimes shortened to AMA, not to be confused with the American Medical Association or the Australian Medical Association, became law in December 2013. The government's goal is, quote, to achieve significant progress, unquote, by 2023.
So it's now 4 years in the 10 years period they allowed them.
Right, almost 5 years. Because it's almost 2018.
Okay, we have to remember that when we will talk where they are now.
Right. And what significant progress means isn't defined in the Act. Principles the Act is based on include accessibility, equality of opportunity and outcome, universal design, and systemic responsibility, which puts the responsibility of preventing and removing barriers on the organization that caused the barrier in the first place, rather than the person with the disability who is affected by the barrier.
Okay, seems very good.
Very laudable.
The idea is very good.
Yeah. So the AMA lays out a process to create accessibility standards to prevent and remove barriers that disable people.
Oops.
In 5 areas.
First, Twitch, that doesn't seem to be big, but this is standard you take.
Right. It's laying out a process. It's laying out a process. It's not saying these are your rights. It's saying we're going to do this process.
Okay.
In 5 areas: employment, accommodation, the built environment, which includes buildings, multi-unit housing, and transportation.
Okay, nice.
Goods, services, and information, and prescribed activities and undertakings. And I looked in the definition section for all these terms and didn't find any. So
they doesn't find anything. They find nothing. So they could do a very small thing and say we have a success, or doing very big thing and say we're not finished yet.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So we don't know.
No measurement possible.
Right. The accessibility standards will include what kind of organizations must comply with the law, what they must do to remove and prevent barriers, and the date by which they must comply. So that's what standards are going to include, process of which is included in the law.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So a barrier is defined as, quote, anything that interacts with, unquote, a physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory disability, quote, in a way that may hinder the person's full and effective participation in society on an equal basis, unquote. And they can be physical or built into the environment, related to information, communication, or technology, an attitude, or they can be found in a policy or practice.
Attitude, including attitude, is very good.
Right, and also that they did make the point of including people with cognitive and psychiatric disabilities was very
I think this is one of the first provinces to do that.
right. Specifically doing that is a good thing, yes. So the Minister of Families, currently Scott Fielding, is responsible for overseeing the development and application of the AMA. This includes drawing up and implementing the accessibility standards. Right. Only the standard for customer service is in effect right now. So 4 years after the law goes into effect and we've got only the customer service, it doesn't deal with any of the construction or...
Yeah, and all other services that they talked about before are very, very, very wide, and they have to do only one standard. Okay?
Right.
And even the standard is less good than the height.
Right. And in fact, you know, there exists already standards for employment, for accommodation, for that already exists. They don't have to reinvent anything.
Yeah, and sometime in some province, maybe not the Manitoba, but sometime the law and the regulation already exist. They just not put in service.
Right.
They're just not being applied.
Right. Standards dealing with employment, information, and communication, the built environment, and transportation are still being written. Other important services like education and healthcare aren't being touched yet. So they haven't even started on those.
Oops.
And they're 4 years into their
Only
10
5 years to finish
major
it
progress.
completely.
Yeah.
A bit more than 5 years.
Yeah.
But let's say the last 6 months should be the just wrap around of all things they have done. So they still have 5 year flush.
Yeah. As with Ontario's law, the content of these standards is not easy to find, and the staggered implementation doesn't take into account how barriers can overlap. And so that means you might have a good customer service policy, but if your store isn't accessible, that doesn't help anybody. Well, it doesn't help a lot of people.
Not all.
Right. So, you know, that's why it has to all go into effect relatively quickly for it to be actual.
Yeah, everything is related to
legislation.
another thing. You know, it's all mixed together. Yeah. If one thing that is not done, it affects a lot around.
Yep. The minister is assisted in his work by the compliance director and an accessibility advisory council. Members of the council must be people with disabilities, representatives of disability organizations, or representatives of organizations affected by accessibility standards. So that could be business owners.
Yeah, it's not so bad if the majority is always people with disability.
Right.
But if the majority is taken by the business people, too bad for us.
Right, exactly. It needs to be there needs to be enough balance so that accessibility ends up in the forefront. And oftentimes, you know, one thing that can happen is sometimes people with disabilities are sort of run over by the very assertive business people. So, you know, it's important to have enough balance, not just by numbers, but by actual power in the committees. Okay, the act is enforced through records kept by businesses, assuming they keep their records.
Yeah.
Inspections of businesses by the compliance director, or fines of up to $250,000 paid to the government of Manitoba. So $250,000, that sounds really exciting.
Impressive.
But how many, I mean, as we'll see in our next subject, those kind of penalties don't usually actually get assessed.
Yeah, there's no apply, it doesn't apply to anything.
Right.
So
Right.
It's just a number in the air somewhere.
looks good.
It looks good. Yeah.
However, the compliance director does not accept or investigate complaints from individuals.
Oops. The only people who could complain is a disability people.
Right.
But he doesn't accept complaint for them.
Right.
So
Right.
there's no complaint.
Right.
Never ever.
Right. It's, you know, this is supposed to be a disability rights law, and people with disabilities are affected when their rights are curtailed, but they don't have the option to file complaints.
Yeah.
And so who's going to do it on their behalf? It's these advisory councils?
Too bad.
You know.
Nobody.
No. Just no. Okay. Public sector groups, such as the province's hydro and liquor companies, post-secondary schools, towns, and hospitals, must prepare accessibility plans every other year. These plans must explain what they have done to identify, prevent, and remove barriers in the past, what they will do in the future, and their strategies to evaluate the organization's discriminatory policies, programs, practices, services, and bylaws. So that is actually something that is present in the Americans with Disabilities Act as well, that public agencies have to do accessibility plans and say how they're going to remove barriers. And one thing we know is that it's often very difficult to get public agencies to do those plans. So
Yeah.
whether or not the plans are being done and whether they're being followed is a good
Good wish.
question.
It's a good wish.
And also, you need somebody in the agency who's responsible for the plan in order for it to get followed. And if there's nobody who's responsible, whose job is on the line if they don't follow the plan, then nothing happens.
Okay, the possibility is almost the same if you throw a penny in a fountain
Yeah.
and do a wish.
Right, exactly.
Okay, great.
Disability advocates and organizations must be consulted when drafting a plan. Plans are available on the organization's websites as well as the government's, provincial government site. The Act's effectiveness must be reviewed every 4 years. If the first evaluation has been done, the results are not available yet. So we haven't seen anything.
Okay, we are 4 years in the plan, a bit more, and we doesn't have see anything yet.
Right.
Okay, no report, no nothing.
Yeah, no, we couldn't find anything.
Okay.
So if we can't
Nothing
find
available
anything, it's
easy.
not findable.
Yep.
Taylor, did you want to add anything?
Oh, we doesn't hear you.
Uh-oh.
Your mic should be the.
Oh, I wonder if it's frozen.
No, the image is not frozen, but we doesn't hear you.
Sorry about that.
Try to say something.
Or try to leave and come back. Use the same link to come back. See if that works. I was thinking she's not saying anything.
Well, she's talking right now, but nothing happened.
Right. Well, okay. Okay, we'll go on to our second topic. Our second topic is Quebec's Commission on End-of-Life Care issues its second annual report. All right. Quebec's Commission on End-of-Life Care released a report describing the euthanasia deaths that took place in the province from December 2015 to June 2017. Our sound is still working, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Last year at this time, in other words, November 4th, 2016, we reviewed the December 2015 to June 2016 report provided by the Commission. One important thing to note from that time period was that 2 people were euthanized without being, quote, at the end of life.
Oops. This is a major thing.
Yeah. In any other circumstance, this violation of the law's safeguards would be considered murder.
Yeah.
And, you know, the idea was to have these safeguards to prevent problems. But if the safeguards aren't enforced, then problems
it's the
aren't
same thing that
prevented.
nothing, no, doesn't have any safeguard.
Right.
And one thing to remember, we have a law about murder, and the act of the medical thing, people killing people without being sued is an exception inside the law.
Right.
Over
Is it an exception to the laws on murder?
yeah. So if they don't follow the rule of this exception, they commit a murder.
Yeah.
But right now we have 2 murders that nobody do anything with it.
Right. That was in.
No police,
right.
no college of doctor or whatever.
Right. There's been no response to those 2 from last year. That's from last year.
Yeah.
Most of the current report focuses on the 12-month period from June 2016 to June 2017. During that time, a total of 634 applications were reviewed. 618 of these deaths took place in institutions, and another 20 occurred in doctor's offices or at home.
Something doesn't add.
Right. There are a lot of weird things about how they did the numbers on this report. They're getting them from different sources,
but
and it doesn't always add up.
Yeah, basic mathematics doesn't seem to be their strong part.
Right, right. 634 is not the same as 618 plus 20. That's 638. But I don't know.
Yeah, basically, it's bizarre.
Right, right. Okay. 237 of the forms documenting those 634 deaths, or 37%, didn't contain enough information for the commission to do a preliminary evaluation. So they didn't have enough information to even start evaluating whether everything was done right. Even after asking for clarification, the commission lacked sufficient data to decide whether 19 out of the 634 deaths, or 3%, complied with the law. In 12 cases, additional information given was insufficient. So they asked for more information, they got more information, but it still wasn't enough. 4 cases, the commission did not receive the additional information they asked for. So they asked for more information, no response. In 3 cases, they asked for more information, and the doctor responded by saying, "No, I'm not going to give you the information."
Oops. Over the law that we say this is an exception over the law of murder, the refuse is the same thing that to not participate to an inquiry from the police.
Right.
So they should be jailed just for that.
Right. That in it's to block an inquest,
yes.
An inquiry into a crime, that's another crime. Yeah. So again, the safeguards have failed
and
because they're not being enforced.
And our police do nothing about it.
Right.
Nothing.
In fact, 8% of euthanasia deaths did not comply with the law. By way of comparison, the number of deaths per passenger mile in commercial airlines in the United States between 2000 and 2010 was about 0.2 deaths per 10 billion passenger miles. So that's like 0.0000%. And that's certainly a lot better safety record than Quebec has for complying with its safeguards.
And it's mechanic. Okay, there nobody have to take decision, but in the law over euthanasia, it's 100% control. You have to decide if the people will live that way or be killed.
Right.
Okay, that's go no go. In aviation, there is a part of lock or unlock, if you want, accident. Okay.
So are you back with us, Taylor? Is your sound back on?
Can you tell? Is it on?
Yes, we are new.
I don't know what happened because I didn't change anything.
We couldn't hear you.
For
I
quite
know,
a
and I
long-
cut in 5 times. Back to
Do you
provincial
want
laws.
to say about the Manitoba statute?
Yes, I was going to say back to the provincial laws for 1 second. In future weeks, I forget exactly who it is, but someone will have the funds go to improving accessibility in the business that is fined.
Right, exactly. And actually, I forgot to mention that I had read an article today about the Winnipeg Transit Authority is trying to rename its paratransit service. They're spending $12,000.
Very important thing.
So instead of improving service,
Name the thing instead of making it run on time.
Yeah, when you want to sail or a team going bad, have a bad year in a hockey or some other sport, they just change
the sweaters.
The sweater, yeah. That changed everything.
Yeah. So, yeah. And let's see. I lost my place. I'm trying to figure out where we were. Oh, yes.
It was the 31
Right.
non-compliant deaths.
Yeah. What other industry that values public safety would accept so many violations and such a high level of risk?
No other one.
Right. And I was thinking about this as I was doing this research yesterday, and I was thinking, well, there's a formula for risk assessment. There's a matrix that you fill out for risk assessment. And I think the problem is that the people who are pushing assisted suicide don't believe that there is any risk because of the idea that somebody has to ask for it. And so they're just leaving out part of this concept of risk. And that's the difference between those of us who understand what the pressures that inaccessibility and institutionalization and discrimination put on disabled people. We know that those pressures impose a risk that people will ask for assisted suicide and euthanasia, even though they don't really need it, because they're subject to discrimination. The other people don't believe that risk exists. So that's why the risk matrix doesn't work. Risk assessment matrix.
No.
The most common problem with the 31 non-compliant deaths, i.e. 5%, was a lack of independence between the 2 doctors approving the euthanasia requests. This was observed 20 times. Quebec has solved this problem by eliminating the requirement.
Okay, you will have a safety guard and you have a problem with the safety guard. Somebody could not comply with it, so to solve the problem, you just remove the safety guard.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is the Health and Human Services Department, just by fiat, just by changing their policy, they are changing the legislation.
Yeah, they rewrite the law and nobody complains.
Yeah.
You got to remember the decision of the court, the highest court in Canada. They say that we should have boundaries so tight that nobody could cross and do anything bad about them. But we know that we have already had some.
Right.
What are we doing?
Right, exactly.
One more thing.
Yeah.
In conscience protection organizations, they often talk about doctors who don't want to kill their patients. So is that what's happening? People are getting affected in bad ways by killing patients, and then the ones who still do want to do it are relying on these close networks who want to.
Right, exactly. Doctors are getting put in the position, either they're going to have to do the euthanasia or make a referral for it, or they're going to lose status and they may lose their jobs.
Yeah.
But
if they kill somebody without permission,
right,
nothing happened against them.
right.
So they do whatever euthanasia they have to do. Nothing happened.
Right. In 7 cases, the doctor didn't confirm that the person was informed, was making a free choice to die, experienced persistent suffering, and had a consistent wish to die. In another case, the person did not have a serious and incurable illness.
Okay,
So
he was not dying within the next 5 years.
Well, no, that was not at the end of life. This is the person didn't have a serious and incurable illness as defined by the law.
Yeah, it's a good
Wasn't
healthy
really sick.
people.
Well, not healthy, but he wasn't as ill as or maybe had a condition but didn't have an illness that was serious.
Serious enough to affect his life.
Right, or to warrant euthanasia. And there was also a person in the first study who had that situation. So these are, again, 7 people who didn't have the confirmation that they were informed that they were making a free choice, that they had persistent suffering, and that they had a constant wish to die. And this 2 people who weren't eligible because they didn't have a serious and incurable illness.
We have plenty of groups who fight against suicide in many provinces, and many in some provinces. What they do about that?
Great. Well, no, they don't care. They think it's, but we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks.
Sending mixed messages.
Yes. If the person didn't have a serious and incurable illness, they were not eligible for euthanasia. So killing them is a criminal act. Without proof that the person made a free and informed decision, that they are not eligible, and their euthanasia is also a crime. 377 people who requested euthanasia did not receive it. 159 of them were declared ineligible. So, for whatever reason, they didn't meet the criteria, and there were people rejected because of that.
So
159 of them.
At least for a few of them, those bands of boundary worked.
Worked, yes. 107 people died before the approval process was complete. So they applied when they were very close to death, and the approval process was going on, but then they died. So
okay, so 2 things could have happened. The first is the doctor doesn't seem to detect that these people will die within a few minutes or few hours or days, okay? Or the second option is they respect the 10 days, which they are not forced to do that,
right.
Okay? If the person is dying, they have the permission to give any pain medication to the death.
Right. And what we know, this goes back to one of our 4 reasons that this is not necessary. Exactly. Because if these people are so close to death, they don't need assisted suicide. They don't need you.
And the doctor will fight their suffering as far as possible to the death, which is not killing these people. It's just caring these people.
Right. 79 people withdrew their request, so that's good. Some people originally thought they would want euthanasia, and then they decided against it. 15 applications were still being reviewed when the reporting period ended, and others moved home or between institutions, had a medical condition requiring another kind of treatment, or hadn't yet chosen the date of their death. So
that second one blows my mind.
Yeah. Gee, what date? I want to die.
Yeah.
There's a good
the day the music died.
Right.
As some of my other friends working in bioethics like to say, we should be killing people's problems, not the people. The suffering, not the sufferers.
Right, exactly, exactly. This report makes it very clear that safeguards do not do what the name suggests. They don't keep people from dying unnecessarily, especially when the rules aren't always followed. And again, this is a question of the province not following its own rules. They said, we're going to have these great safeguards, nothing bad is going to happen. So they have these great safeguards, but they're not following them. You know, laws being violated. Okay. For more information about the topics that we discuss here, you can go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/toujours vivant not dead yet. Visit our website at tvndy.ca. You can email us at info@tv-ndy.ca, or you can follow us on Twitter @TVNDY. And before we go, next week, Taylor has a special presentation. I'm going to be in California giving a presentation at a conference. And then the week after, I won't be here. And so we'll have a week off. So next week, special presentation by Taylor. And 2 weeks, so you'll see us next in the beginning of December.
In 3 weeks.
In 3 weeks.
Okay. Thank you, Taylor, for doing that.
Yeah.
No
Thanks.
problem. I will see you all next week.
Yeah.
Not from a coffee shop this time, I promise.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks. Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.